Welcome back in, everybody. I am Benjamin Parker. We are joined by Robertson Dwyer from Phantom Sports. We are talking about the NFC East. We are also in conjunction with Sports Money. So, on whatever platform you were watching, we appreciate you being with us tonight. Robertson, how are you doing, man?
Doing great. Doing great. Excited to talk about the East today.
Yeah, I know this is a particular passion for you and expertise as well because you cover the Commanders for Phantom Sports, and along with that, you get a real familiarity with the division that they're in, as do most experts on this. So we'll get to Washington eventually, but all of this is at least familiar territory to you, to say the least. So start right off. The Dallas Cowboys, 12-5 last year, had a good season. Obviously didn't end the way they would have hoped for. Now the Dak Prescott contract starts to get a little bigger each year.
hmm
Wasn't that big of a problem last year, certainly, but now it's starting to crunch along with a couple of other contracts. They lost several pieces. They added some. Without being too deep into it, what do you think we ought to see out of Dallas this year?
Um, Definitely a step back, and I know it's not because I'm a Washington fan, and it's not because I hate the Cowboys, which I do, but it's not because of that.
Of course.
Um, I mean, I try to look at everything objectively, but uh, mainly the step back is because of the Amari Cooper loss and the loss of Lyle Collins. I'm not trying to get too specific here, but those are two big pieces. Lyle Collins is a very nice right tackle, and Amari Cooper is a number one wide receiver. And granted, he disappeared at times last year, but just look at the stats. They've been beaten to death into us. Just go look at them again. Dak's numbers with Amari Cooper on the field versus with him without. The record's the same, the stats are the same. He had an obvious impact on Dak, even if he didn't necessarily show up in games. So that's going to be that's going to have a big impact on Dak. The only thing that can offset that, I don't think isn't even necessarily any of the receivers that they brought in. It's going to be more the development of CD Lamb in that sense. And if Zeke can even be 80% of what he once was. The defense is a concern, but I feel like they added enough there to kind of offset anything there. I think they might have, if anything, they might have improved a little bit. But the team, it's been this way ever since Dak took over. The team's going to take him. The team's going to go as far as Dak takes him.
Let me ask you about that. As a Washington fan, which, obviously you're not covering up, but we are trying to be as fair as we can to these other teams. As a Washington fan, when the Cowboys are coming to town, and I've always said this, fans of other teams know who they don't want to see step on the field and who they do. When Mike McCarthy is head coach of the Cowboys and Dak Prescott as quarterback of the Cowboys step on the field, it surely cannot bring the same fear that when Tom Brady is stepping on the field or Bill Belichick is across the way or when, some of these other big names come across. It doesn't mean that the Cowboys are bad, but surely it does not evoke the same fear when you're playing these guys, right? You probably always think, hey, we've got a chance to win this game.
From a Washington fan's perspective, yes, that is true to a point. At least for me, the past few years, it's always been, can we stop the run game and put it all on Dak? And that's been the case a couple times. A couple of times, Dak's been able to pull it out. A couple other times he hasn't. But the point about Mike McCarthy is a notable one. I actually think that he's in more trouble than even some Cowboy fans think. Jerry Jones hasn't been known to let go of head coaches quickly before, but I think this could be a case where he does, especially if the Cowboys start to struggle early this year. They kept Dan Quinn around for a reason. Well, I think the writing's on the wall there. I don't know how early in the season he could go, but just say they start out 0-3, 0-4. There's going to be some rumblings because it's Dallas. It's Dallas.
Right.
We all know it. It's Dallas. Conversely, if they win, if they go 3-0, 4-0, they're gonna be like, oh, Dak's the MVP and Mike McCarthy's coach of the year. But like I said, this team is going to go as far as Dak takes them. It's been that way since he's been the quarterback, and it's not going to be any different this year as far as that goes. And it's really going to be dependent on if Zeke can return to what he was, and if CeeDee Lamb can develop further into a number one wide receiver with Amari Cooper gone.
The over-under from DraftKings a couple of weeks ago, it's the latest number I have, is at 10 for the Cowboys. Would you take the under on that, or do you feel comfortable with possibly the over there?
It pains me to say it. I'd have to take the over just because the East is weak. I mean, not the East. I'm sorry, the NFC. The NFC is weak, and the Cowboys don't have a very difficult schedule. I mentioned before that the Cowboys have a tough 5 games just because they play the Buccaneers, the Bengals. They have 2 division games against the Giants and Commanders, and then they play the Rams. That's where I think they can get in trouble. But after that, it's pretty much cake. It's the NFC North, and it's the AFC South. There's nothing imposing there. So, after that Rams game, their hardest game is Week 17 against the Titans. And who knows what Tannehill's going to be this year for the Titans. So it's going to be a cakewalk for him. I'd be inclined to take the over, even though it pains me as a Washington fan.
It's a fascinating point. But before we dove into this, I looked at the lines here. The Cowboys still been a little bit more favored than the Eagles in terms of some of these over-unders that we're seeing all across the board. And I thought, well, maybe that's just the difference, the respect for Dak Prescott versus Jalen Hurts. But it also could be what you just mentioned there with Dallas, some of the schedule that they're up against this year as well. Next up, the Philadelphia Eagles. So they were 9-8 last year. Had an interesting year. Had a lot of good things going on, and yet the end just really wasn't that. The end was not that spectacular as they finished out the season. So anyway, Philadelphia makes a ton of changes, which no surprise. Their front office likes to do things very differently than anybody else in the NFL. So until they get it right, they're always going to be tinkering and doing a lot of stuff. But they pulled off a ton of moves. Talk to us about what we might see out of the Eagles this year, and specifically how you think they might do against the Cowboys this year in those 2 matchups.
I like what the Eagles did. Again, pains me to say as a Washington fan, but you can't, objectively looking at it, you can't dislike anything. They got the heir apparent to Fletcher Cox with Jordan Davis in the draft, which I think is a great pick. They got possibly the steal of the draft into Kobe Dean in the 3rd round, who, in early in March, I wanted the Commanders to take at 11. Right. I love Nakobe Dean out of Georgia. Like, I loved that. He was my favorite player coming into this draft. And I was like, why is this guy sliding? I know he's got injuries and stuff. Like, dang. AJ Brown trade, that's obvious. Big move. That scares the living crap out of me. It would be scarier if it wasn't Jalen Hurts throwing him the ball, but still scary nonetheless because it opens up a lot of things because they already have Devontae Smith. And I do like Miles Sanders too, the running back. So they have a lot of potential here. They have the potential to win the division. I just don't know if Jalen Hurts can get them there. As far as the Cowboys, they'll probably split. It'll probably be in some crazy fashion. They'll probably be the away team wins both games or something like that. It'll just be something weird and off the wall. They're always physical matchups no matter what. So they'll probably split as far as the Cowboys go.
I think the games between these 2 teams this year are going to be can't-miss matchups, no matter whether primetime or not. I don't care. I think they're just going to be got-to-see football. I think it's going to be very exciting. Now, I will ask you this. You mentioned Jalen Hurts, who I think looked a lot better than I ever expected him to coming out of college. And yet, I think it's obvious he's a limited quarterback. He's going to be inconsistent at times. There are going to be times that defenses can kind of hem him in a little bit. And he's not going to just be able to destroy everybody all over the field the way some people can. So they have that. There are also some players, even A.J. Brown to a degree, people on the offensive line, people on the defensive line who some combination of age and injury starts to kick in a little bit there. how serious are the Eagles as an actual Super Bowl contender this year? Do they have no chance? Do they have a half a chance? What do you feel about that? What's the ceiling for this team this year?
Well, I definitely think they're in the hunt for a wild card, but as far as being a Super Bowl contender, anything's possible once you get into the playoffs, but I don't really see them as a Super Bowl contender this year. I think, if Jalen Hurts is going to take on natural progression of quarterback, getting better each year, I don't think this is the year. I think next year would be the year that you'd see, you'd see improvement this year, but I think next year is the year like, okay, we have Jalen Hurts. We know he's our quarterback. We're going to buy in. We're going to really buy in, continue to improve around him, and then we'll look to take that step forward. Again, I like what they've done, but I just don't see it with Hurts for this upcoming season. And it's nothing to do with the schedule necessarily. I love Jalen Hurts coming out of college. I was honestly scared to death when the Eagles drafted him as a Commanders or as a Washington fan. I was scared to death. I was like, oh crap. Because I really liked him in college. I even liked him when he was at Alabama, before he went to Oklahoma, before he transferred. I liked him. I understand why Nick Saban went away from him, but because he is a limited quarterback. But I just liked his leadership. I liked his style of play. I liked a lot of things about him. And even, like I said, even when he got to the pros, I still liked him. I don't know if he can be that guy. I think he can be. I think his ceiling is top half of the league, but I don't think it's top 10.
I agree. And when we're talking about, I think we can put the Cowboys and the Eagles together. I think the NFC is weak enough this year to where they could, if everything falls their way, injuries and that key turnover here or there, win a couple of close ones, they could have an excellent season, maybe get to 11 or 12 victories. And maybe if somebody else, one of the big guys, the Tom Brady's or somebody for the Rams, somebody, Aaron Rodgers, somebody gets injured, I think they could find themselves in the NFC title game. And then, as you said, anything can happen. So it wouldn't be the most outlandish thing, but I'd never put any money on it. I'm certainly, any money I ever had for this upcoming season for the Super Bowl we're talking about would be on the Buccaneers, or it would be on the Rams, or it would even be on the Packers first, to be honest. And we just did the Packers video. I don't think either one of us necessarily was going to put money on the Packers. But
no.
I think the Cowboys and Eagles could have a very good season and have a lot of fun playing football this year. But I really wouldn't put any money on the Super Bowl appearance there. Real quick for the Eagles, give you an over/under of 9.5. Which direction are you going to go there?
I'll take the under, but I think they do win 9 games. I think they can win 9 games. They can win more. I think, like I said, they have potential. It's just going to depend on how quickly Jalen Hurts develops. I don't think it's going to be that, like I said, that drastic this year. I think he's another year away from really developing into a legitimate, solid starting quarterback. So I'll say that I'll take the under there. I'll say they win. They can win 9 games.
This is one of the few places that I think you and I see it a little bit differently. I want to take the over here for the Eagles. The only reason I wouldn't, because I like what they did for this upcoming season, is that the team we're about to talk about, Washington, is going to be tough. The Giants aren't going to be a pushover. The Giants aren't going to be good, but they're not going to be just cakewalk either, I don't think. The Cowboys there's no easy wins there. You kind of have to look around the conference to pick up some of these wins against some of these other lousy teams. But a lot of the teams you're playing, the 6 games inside the division, kind of stout. So I'm a little split here. I think I will take the over on the Eagles. I think I can see them going 10-7. I think that's what I'll pick here. But it's going to be a fascinating season at the top of this division, I think. Now let's tell you what. I'm going to go ahead and hit the Giants up first, and then we'll come back and end up on the team that you know the best, of course.
Smart.
Yeah. we might even forget about the Giants if we don't go ahead and talk about them now.
Yeah.
The Giants were 4-13 last year. it was pretty bad. There weren't many good moments for the Giants. In fact, there were a lot of ugly moments for the Giants last year. They've gone in and cleaned house a lot here. I think most people like the draft picks that they did. I think most people would agree over the next 5 years, the Giants look like they're starting to get in a decent trajectory anyway. But for this season, what is it realistically going to look like for the Giants? And I'll go ahead and give you their over/under of 7. I'm not even sure why it's that high, but maybe you do know why it's that high. What do you think about the Giants this year coming up?
I don't know why it's a 7. I'll just be straight up. I don't know why it's 7, unless I really like Brian Dable. I really like him. So it's possible that the odds makers just really like the likelihood that Dable is going to turn around Daniel Jones, because Daniel Jones does have the skills, the tools to be a solid starting quarterback in the league. He does. He just hasn't done it on a consistent basis, and he's never produced a significant stretch of wins to back that up with. So I think that the odds makers might think that the Brian Dable can turn that around. I don't believe so. I think Brian Dable is going to do fine as the head coach of the Giants. It kind of scares me a little bit as a Washington fan. It's like, oh God, what if they get a quarterback? What's going to happen here?
Right.
Because I think Daniel Jones can be the answer. I just don't think he is. It's just trending in the wrong direction. They hedged their bets and picked up Tyrod Taylor. And I think it's likely that we see him at some point this season due to Jones's performance issues. But for the most part, I actually think that the Giants punted on this season already. Just based on the lack of any serious outside of Tyrod Taylor, any serious free agent acquisitions, and then the draft. I do like what they did in the draft, but they're all developmental guys. None of these guys are gonna, except for Evan Neal. None of these guys are gonna come in and contribute immediately. At least not on on the surface. It doesn't seem like. Seems like a very much building year for Brian Dable to see, okay, where are we as an organization and where do we go from here? Based on the results of the season, which is important for a franchise, especially with the new regime. So I don't know why it's at 7. I think it should be more at 5 personally, but the Vegas wants to make some money.
Yeah, I agree. So much of these Vegas everything, you're not just predicting what you think will happen, you're also predicting what you think the public is going to do with some of these numbers. I think the Giants are heading the right direction, but I don't think it shows up this year. I think the only thing that you have better for this year for the Giants is you don't have those ugly moments that you had last year. I think you have hope now. I think you have good, clean, competitive football, but I don't see them getting anywhere near this 7-win total that is out there. So I'll easily pick the under on that. Let's end it up here, and we'll spend some extra time on this. The Washington Commanders, 7-10 last year. Talk to me about what we might see out of them this year, maybe what they've done differently, what you expect to see.
I'm trying to
good,
just.
Huh?
I don't know. I don't know. I've never been more optimistic and more pessimistic at the same time, because most of it stems from the quarterback situation. Obviously we traded for Carson Wentz. We gave up a lot to get him. We ate all of his contract. Why? I don't. It could prove to be a steal of a deal at the end of the day. Right now, it's not looking like that, so that's what you have to take it as. I like the draft for the most part. I love Jahan Dotson. Granted, it was a little high, but I love Jahan Dotson. And I try not to put too much stake into OTAs or minicamp, but early returns are that he's uncoverable, according to one person. But again, it's June. We can't put much stock into that. one thing that concerns me is the defense, and it has nothing to do with what's going on with Del Rio right now. It's mainly just we didn't really do anything to improve the defense. In fact, we lost more than we added. We didn't add a middle linebacker, which was arguably our weakest spot in the defense. They initially said Cole Holcomb's the Mike. Cole Holcomb, or he's not the Mike. They don't think he can do it. Now they're trying him with the Mike. Go figure. I don't know. We lost depth along the defensive line. And granted, we drafted a guy, but we had two proven guys that were much better, at least on paper and based on experience and all that. The secondary is still a question. Safety is still a question as usual. We didn't do anything on the defensive side of the ball except for lose pieces. And I'm actually more optimistic about the offense, even though Carson Wentz is the quarterback. I just don't know where this team is headed. I don't. We could catch fire if Carson Wentz plays well. We could win easily 10, 11 games because the schedule really is not that hard. Our schedule is not that difficult at all. But we could also be headed to a double-digit loss season. This is such a weird team in terms of trying to figure out what the heck we're doing. Not in terms of the direction, but just like in terms of what the results are going to be. It could be a wide range of anything.
There's so much I want to ask you about here. I think one thing I want to definitely ask about, though, the OC, the offensive coordinator, is Turner, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and his first name Josh. Do I have that correct as well?
Scott Turner.
Scott Turner. Okay. I like what I've seen out of him, even though the offensive numbers haven't been up there. When on the few games that I've actually sat down and watched, I liked the creativity. And the reason I liked it, when I watched Ron Rivera back in Carolina, I didn't see a whole lot of creativity. I thought I saw just a whole lot of in the box, old school thinking. And I expected to see the same thing when I turned on the Washington film, but I didn't get it, at least the games that I was watching. Again, could have been the opponents I was playing. But talk to me a little bit about Turner and the offense, and how much do you actually trust him or like him? If we could pull out the quarterback for a minute and ignore that for a minute.
So I think largely Scott Turner is still an unproven offensive coordinator, but I don't think that's due to his the lack of his ability. A lot of our fans are very down on Scott Turner just because, the offense has struggled, but no one wants to really point out that's because of the quarterback. We've had a one-legged Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, God rest his soul, but, he just wasn't it. And Taylor Heineke and, a host of others at this point. Like, it's hard to keep track of. So I think he is creative. I think I don't have a problem with his play calling. I've never had an issue with it. I love the pieces that he has to work with. I think this is a more of a, not a make or break year for him, but it's kind of like, we're going to see what you really have, especially if the entire offense is healthy. Because now you have Curtis Samuel healthy, and he can be a poor man's Debo. That's the easiest comparison to really make there. He's not as big and strong as Debo, but he has a lot of the same skills as far as that goes. You have Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick, two very versatile backs. Now we have suddenly a host of wide receivers, especially Curtis Samuel's healthy. We got Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson now. Logan Thomas, when he comes back healthy again, barring health here. Logan Thomas, I like John Baines, the second-year tight end, and we also drafted Cole Turner out of Nevada. I really like him. So we have a host of weapons. It's going to be interesting to see if Turner can utilize them. I think he can. Again, it's going to depend on how Wentz plays, but I think it's going to get very creative if everything starts, working out. And I'm excited for him. I know a lot of people aren't. A lot of people think he should have been fired last year, but I think last year, a lot of people were impressed with what happened last year with Taylor Heineke because of Scott Turner.
Right.
How many offensive coordinators can get 7 wins out of a noodle arm backup? And that's not a slight on Heineke. I really like Heineke. I was in the Heineke camp. I loved Heineke. I wanted him to start over Fitzpatrick. But, at the same time, it's like that 4-game win streak in the middle of the season, a lot of people were impressed with that around the league. I do know that for a fact. I remember seeing reports about that. So I don't think Scott Turner's going anywhere, at least for another couple seasons.
That was another thing I liked about it, because when I watched Heineke, and again, I don't always get to break down film on all of these guys, but I'm watching Heineke put up some pretty good yardage numbers, especially the early mid part of the season. That kind of faded down the stretch, I think. But when I watched Heineke on TV, I didn't see anything that made me think, man, Washington's really got something here. They should be winning with this guy. It made me think more, well, somebody on the staff there is doing something right to even give them a chance here with Heineke, to be honest. Maybe not that he's terrible, but I just didn't see why they were winning with him. It made me feel more like somebody on the staff was doing something right. I think people forget a lot of times. You mentioned, maybe he's still unproven. These coaches are all developing and changing and growing too, just like the players, especially if they're on the younger end of the spectrum as a coach. A lot of times they're still developing. We've seen it more than once with Adam Gase. We've seen it with Josh McDaniels. We've seen it with some of these other younger guys. We saw it with Tom Coughlin years ago, even at an advanced age. Yeah, the coaches still change and develop too. They're still up for that as well. I wanted to ask you about Ron Rivera. How does Washington feel about him? How do you feel about Ron Rivera as head coach?
He's the most mature person we've had at the position for quite some time, probably since Gibbs. And that's not a slight at Mike Shanahan or anything. He's a grown up in the building. He has full control over the team, which, depending on how you look at it, could be a bad thing. A lot of fans, I feel like, are disappointed a little bit because they felt like, oh, finally we have the coach, but it's not really doing a ton. But I like him. I don't love him. I like him a lot. I think he's what this team needs right now, especially given all the turmoil that's going on right now. I can't really envision, based on the options we had at the time when we were hiring, I can't really envision anybody else, handling this any better. He was when we hired Ron Rivera, it was like Christmas here almost. It's like, oh my God, we got Ron Rivera. Like, we actually got a high profile coach. And now people are like ready to turn their backs on him, run him out of here with pitchforks, some of them. But I think he's done, a good job, all things considered. He's made some poor choices. He should have went all in on Matthew Stafford last year. He had the opportunity to, but there's other factors that we can get into with that. I'm not going to get into it. He should have pushed harder for him. But, at the end of the day, he's got to he's all in on Wentz right now. And for better or worse, he's going to sink or swim with that, based on how Wentz performs. He's all in on it. I don't think he's on the hot seat even if Wentz fails, just because of everything that's going on in Washington. But, I like him. I'm willing to give him, a couple, benefits of the doubts. So I don't really understand the uproar against him at the current moment, but it's Washington. Our fans are kind of crazy at times. They get a little irrational. So, I think he's fine right now.
I tend to agree. We saw Ron Rivera up close here for years in Carolina. I put him right in the middle of the pack as just a good, rock solid head coach. I don't think he's going to carry too many rosters past what they're already capable of, but I also don't think he's going to hold back any rosters that could be having a chance to win. I think whatever roster that he gets, and again, apparently he's got some pretty good influence on the roster itself, but I think whatever roster he gets, I think he's going to do a good, solid job with that in terms of head coaching. So I like that they have him. I might take away some of his influence in shaping the roster, but I would not. I wouldn't even think about letting him go as head coach. I think he does a good, solid job, and especially if he's got coordinators there that can flex a little bit. I've got an over under here of 8 from DraftKings, and I think you already mentioned that they could go up as high as maybe 10 or 11. But that could also be in the double-digit loss column. So at the end of the day, if I give you 8, are you going to take the over on that or the under for Washington?
Hmm. If Wentz plays like he did last year, like just not carbon copy per se, but just like, 27 and 7 touchdowns, something roughly like that. I'd take the over. I think we can win 9 games. Um, and that's just even if he plays like he did last year. I think he can play better than he did last year. I really do. There's a lot more weapons here than there were in Indy. Granted, we don't have Jonathan Taylor, but what we lack in terms of that, Antonio Gibson, I still think is a very nice back. I think he's a 1,000-yard rusher. I think he can repeat that this season. Um, and we do have a lot more receivers if they stay healthy and if we get the Terry McLaurin situation straightened out. Um, you know, if he plays well, I think sky's the limit, really. If the defense plays well, obviously that's, I guess, any team. But uh, I'll go with 9 wins, really. I'll go with 9 wins.
Fair enough. I do think Washington is at least in the mix for a potentially good year this year. I think there's enough. I think there's enough going on in Washington that they at least get to have some hope for this year. If you, all things considered, with the NFC being a little weak this year, it's top heavy, but it's weak everywhere else. Where do you put their playoff chances? Is there any shot at all the NFC East gets 2 teams in the playoffs this year, and could Washington be one of them?
I think we get 2. I don't know if Washington gets in. It's going to depend on tiebreakers because I believe if we rewind the tape here, I think I also said the Eagles get 9 wins, if I'm
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, that's what we were
Um,
leaning toward.
yeah, so that's going to be a tie. It's going to depend on tiebreakers. I division, I can't tell. I mean, it's going to be a toss-up. I don't really want to get into matchups right now. I don't really know who finishes second or third. I should know it by now, but that's just tough. If they finish second, then I think they get the. I think whoever finishes second in the division gets the last wild card spot because I think the other 2 are coming from the West. Um, like 5 and 6 are coming from the NFC West.
Right, and we don't
Um,
think they're coming from the North.
no, not at all, and they're definitely not coming from the South unless Jameis Winston, plays like everyone thinks he's going to play. I don't think he's going to be anything that's spectacular. Um, it's going to depend for Washington between Washington and Philadelphia, head-to-head matchups and division record. But because I'm a fan, I'll say they finish second and they get the 7th wild cards or the 7th spot in the playoffs. But again, it's a toss-up, really. I think it's going to be a toss-up. I think it's going to be a close race. It's really going to depend on how Wentz plays down the stretch.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a fun season all through the division. I think it's a fun season. I think this division might be one of the better watches this year in the NFC side. I think everything in the AFC is going to be fun to watch. All right, so one final question I want to kick out with here. The Washington Commanders finally picked out a new name. I guess it's a few months ago now. Um, as a fan, how was it? How did you feel going that long without a name? Were you one of the people who got attached to the Washington football team as a name? And how did you like the name that they finally came up with?
Short answer is I don't. Um, I don't hate it, but I don't like it at all either. I was in when the Redskins went away. It took a while for me. It really did. It hurt me deep. And we're not going to get into the politics of it. We're not going to get into the racial aspect of it. We all have our opinions about it. But when they changed the name, I was in. There was a social media campaign for the name Red Wolves. I loved that name. I was like, if you're going to change it to something cool like that. The Commanders is not cool. It's not really expiring. Like, oh, we're the Commanders. Like,
Right.
I'm not. It's not like all inspiring. It's not. It's not something that you want to chant. Apparently, the new fight song's going to be a remake of "Hail to the Redskins," and it's going to be. I guess they're inserting the Commanders or something. It's just quite frankly disrespectful in my opinion. But it's kind of okay, whatever. It's kind of like everything that's been going on with this team, especially with Dan Snyder the past decade plus. Whatever.
I said that was going to be the last question. It's not. If you could trade out your owner in your front office for the Cowboys owner in front office, would you do it, or would you just keep what you got?
Oh man. Oh, that's an interesting question. I feel like I'm going to get killed for even hesitating, but
right.
I guess I would keep it mainly because I know that Dan, at least I'm hoping, I'm praying that Dan Snyder's going to be out soon.
Okay.
And at this point, for me, it's like it can't get much worse, right?
Right.
It can't get much worse. So it's kind of like it's only got to get better, at least in the next couple of years, right? Hopefully, Dan Snyder's gone. Hopefully we get some competent ownership in here. But I never liked Jerry Jones, so I'm going to say no to that. And I was thinking, well, at least it's stability and somewhat of a grown up. But I'm thinking,
right.
like, no, not really, not really.
No.
So I don't. The problem is here, Dan Snyder wanted to be like Jerry Jones in terms of handing his hand and everything. And that was the problem. So I don't know that I'd want more of that. So
yeah, I don't think there's a right answer there. I don't think there's any good choices there.
It's not as straightforward as you think, because then you got to think about it. Like, man, it's like, is Jerry Jones really as bad as Dan Snyder? But then you just think of other things, and it's like, right. Yeah, I think I know things are hopefully going to be changing soon. So
right.
You got to hope for better in the future. So I'll just stick with what I got.
All right. Well, we could keep talking, but I think we've covered it pretty well tonight without getting into a lot of technical detail here. I do think it's going to be a fun season. Tell everybody again where they can find you if they want to read or watch more of your work.
So if you haven't caught on yet, I do cover the Commanders for Phantom Sports. You can find my articles at phantomsportsindustries.com. You can follow me on Twitter at RELVIAR99. It was fun doing this with you, Ben.
Robertson, I've enjoyed it as always, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, man. It's always a pleasure with you.
All right, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you so much for watching. We'll have more content coming out as always. Have a great night. Bye.